Hello guys, welcome back to another video. So a lot of my content generally revolves around classic games, mainly because the goal of this channel is to cover the evolution of genres and video game franchises over a long period of time. I almost want to call it gaming history. That might make you think it's a boring topic. The game that I want to cover today doesn't fall into my usual favorite genre of strategy games, but is a hybrid of the popular Sandbox game and RPG. Terraria shockingly caught my interest a few years after its release in 2011, and is now one of my favorite games that I put in a lot of playing time towards. Which I know some of you watching are probably confused that someone who enjoys strategy in all of their amazing games would betray the genre like that. But let me tell you why I think Terraria is such a fun game for everyone. First, let's start off by looking back at where the sandbox game genre began and defining what makes a game a sandbox. So going by the name Sandbox, essentially the player is put into a sandbox, a massive world, and is forced to create tools, food, a home, and many other things to help the player survive. Obviously it can get a little more complex than that, being in a world where you're not alone and other creatures and NPCs are there to support you or make your life miserable. Sandbox games encourage freedom and creativity to build and survive however way you prefer. Early notable sandbox games can trace their roots back to the city build games such as the SimCity franchise. In city builders you have the power to build where you want, and you can manipulate certain functions in your society, but really you don't have full control of your own outcome, as disasters can appear whenever, and population satisfaction can only be influenced. The sandbox genre, what we think of today, insists on having the player fully control their outcome, and city builders to me may be a far distant descendant. Other influences can be traced back to one of the first 3D open world games called Elite. Of course, when you compare it now to newer open world games, you can see how primitive it is today, being released in 1984. In Elite, essentially you are a commander on a mission to explore the galaxy and earn credits through trade, piracy, missions, and mining. The credits can be used to upgrade the commander's ship, fuel, food, and to buy better equipment to help with surviving and earning more efficiently. Though I do think the game lacks a base building aspect, you can argue that the ship upgrades will replace that. Again, I still think that games like Elite, often labeled space traders, are still a distant relative to today's sandbox games. But if you somehow were to combine both the city build genre for the usage of the player's creativity and dealing with some intangibles, and the space trader genre set in a vastly open world where you have to travel to survive and decide your own outcome, you are birthed with the sandbox genre today. Other notable influences that may have a claim are the simulation games, most notably the Sims series, which began in the early 2000s. In The Sims, you have the ability in a bird's eye view to control the action of virtual humans and how they live, taking the idea of city builds to more of a micro level, focusing on each character's personality, appearance, skills, and relationship. Fast forward about a decade later in 2009, the biggest and probably the most important sandbox game would be released, called Minecraft. A first-person 3D game with no direction or tutorial given at all, but endless opportunity to dig, mine, and craft.
No one can tell you what you can or cannot do, with no rules to follow. This adventure, it's up to you.
Originally when I first played this game, I thought the idea of not having any tutorials or instructions was a bit far-fetched. It would grow on me later and make more sense as the gameplay is straightforward and simple. With that being said, the game did come to a point where it was bland and mostly focused on survival with minimal RPG elements. The hunger meter started to feel frustrating and repetitive. It had you focus on that more than other important situations like how were we going to hold off the monsters at nighttime. And don't get me wrong, I do like that the game is open world with no required goals and freedom to do essentially what you want. But it can come to the point where you are repeating a cycle of doing the same things over and over again. Collect, eat, fight, and sleep. Wouldn't it be nice to have an incentive of some sort where you can earn a prize from bosses such as an advanced weapon or item? What about forging two weapons to create an even more powerful one? These were some of the questions that ran through my mind while playing Minecraft, as slowly I began to steer away from the game. Then a few years later, I would say around 2013, I was introduced to Terraria by my brother. I didn't have any high hopes for this game as my first impression was a 2D Minecraft, which I already was not thrilled with Minecraft's repetitive cycle. But Terraria, despite noticeably being similar to Minecraft, had a lot of its own thing going on. Terraria starts you off with creating your own character, choosing their appearance and color is always fun until you find out how much of a racist you are. In this menu, you can also decide the consequence of the character's death, with classic being all money lost, to a ridiculously hard permadeath. Worlds will get auto-generated with certain parameters such as size, level of difficulty from a creative only mode, in Journey to a very difficult one in Master, where enemies deal more damage, weapons are not as strong, and negative effects last longer. Once a world is created, your character is put in it with a few important tools such as a basic copper pickaxe to mine, an axe to chop trees. It may seem lonely at first, but remember, Terraria can be played multiplayer. There isn't a noticeable difference to the outcome between the single and multiplayer modes. Also, you do start off with a guide who is probably the most important NPC of the game for his ability to provide you with all the recipes that material label items can create in order to make better ones. As you begin to build a home to protect you from the creatures that spawn towards you, especially at night, these NPCs also need a home built a certain way if they are going to provide for you services such as a multitude of merchants that sell weapons, special equipment, provide quests, tinkering, and many more. Some NPCs may require a certain objective to be completed before they can move in. This objective is not directly given to you, but you may receive some hints by talking to the NPCs, or simply experimenting and coming across it by mistake. The world that is auto-generated is so massive, with many different areas called biomes on the surface and underground. Biomes on the surface include snow, desert, ocean, and corruption or crimson. These surface biomes can extend to the underground levels. What is so cool about having many types of biomes is that each are unique visually with their own special types of creatures you encounter, and finding the random exclusive treasure chests. Inside the chests are either a valuable accessory or a weapon tied to the biome. If you thought finding a specific accessory or weapon through chests was hard enough, consider items that are found by monster drops to be equally as challenging. The chance of drop is dependent on the rarity of the item, which also relies on how well the item does for you. Higher damaging weapons and useful accessories are much harder to find. Just when you think you have a moment of peace to yourself, you can be caught up with one of the many random events, an invasion where enemies spawn all over the surface and head towards your location. The Blood Moon is an invasion that can occur on the start of a random night. Zombies and other undead-like monsters spawn rapidly and are capable of opening the doors to your home. Other random events include boss spawns. Luckily for you, you are given a bit of a notice on the status message before the boss appears. The type of message will hint at which boss will spawn. Don't be discouraged if the boss mops the floor with you. Barely any prep time was given before he comes knocking at your door. There is an opportunity for a rematch, or likely many of them, but this time you can prepare yourself and summon the boss by activating an item or completing a certain objective whenever you feel you're ready. Preparing includes getting or creating some potions or food that can provide temporary statistical buffs such as attack damage, movement speed, or health regeneration, and other ones. Buffing shouldn't be the only thing you do to prepare for this dogfight, which often takes place at the surface or sometimes underground in a certain biome. Like all boss fights in games, you'll need to maneuver and in some cases run as fast as you can. To make this possible, you'll need to create an arena that fits your needs, open, spacious, and flat to run easily. Taking the time to dig out unnecessary walls, leveling the field, and adding asphalt to speed you up will be the small differences that will get you over the hump. There are other sources that can aid you if you want to get creative by using the NPCs to heal you, such as the nurse, or the dryad who passively increases your defense when you are near her. There is an extracurricular activity in Terraria that you can do to hook you up with some useful items. Fishing, which involves using a rod to give you fish, no doubt, that can be cooked and eaten to buff up stats temporarily. Or you can really get fortunate and find a crate, which basically acts similar to a chest. When open, it gives a bunch of items, possibly accessories or weapons depending on the type of crate you fish out. What will affect your chance of catching some rare items is the size of the body of water and the level of fishing power your rod has. Fishing in certain biomes will mean that you'll likely catch fish and crates of that biome. Just when you think you have done it all in Terraria, from finding and tinkering tons of weapons and accessories, to exploring many biomes, taking down a lot of bosses, and finally beating the one that seemed to be the end of this journey, a new mode is unlocked, Hard Mode. Now I know what you're probably thinking, didn't we already select the difficulty when creating this world? Why is it changing now? Correct, the difficulty has risen once again, but now the world has changed to add much more content. New creatures, weapons, accessories, items, bosses, biomes, and much more. It's almost like you're starting a whole new game. This is how much more content has been added in Hard Mode. I won't get into too much detail of all the changes and additions, but a few notable ones are: new ores will begin to appear throughout the world, cobalt or palladium, mithril or oraculum, and adamantine or titanium. These new ores can be refined to make better armor sets, weapons, and so forth. A new biome both located at the surface and underground called Hollow will be generated randomly in the world. Fairy tale creatures spawn on the surface and illuminate creatures in the underground. In the hard mode, souls begin to appear when killing certain monsters or bosses. The souls are an important ingredient to create higher level weapons and accessories such as wings from the souls of flight. Wings allow your character to fly and be free from fall damage, making it faster to travel across the world. In hard mode, there are also new NPCs with new requirements to move into one of your homes, the tax collector being one of them, and providing you with a unique ability to collect money over a period of time. New invasions can be triggered, but this time they are much more difficult. A few of the invading creatures are airborne and can fly quickly from the sky to easily track you down like a hawk. On top of having the bosses become significantly more difficult than the pre-hard mode, summoning them can be equally as difficult. When trying to find their trigger, like Plantera's bulb randomly throughout the jungle, or searching for a truffle worm to fish out Duke Fisheron. Terraria has so much for the player to do. You will need at least 100 hours to fully complete this game, meaning on top of beating all of the bosses that need strategy, preparation, and trial and error, there are over 300 accessories and 500 unique weapons to find or build through tinkering. With these, you can combine them with 66 armor sets to synergize them as a build. Despite Terraria clearly being an RPG, one aspect it omitted in the game is a character leveling or class system. Instead, players are to emphasize on building their character through the possession of accessories and weapons to improve their stats. Although total health and mana can be permanently increased by finding or creating certain consumable items. It also needs to be brought up that Terraria has had many updates since its release, from major ones that have added content such as bosses, new items, and new biomes, to a multitude of quality of life updates, which easily the indie developer Relogic could have charged for DLC, but didn't. And they also kept the game at a reasonable price on Steam, which is hard to find these days. Some of the updates added content that was a crossover from other games. Most notably, the Deerclops boss came from another popular Sandbox survival game called Don't Start Together. Other crossover content found is Dungeon Defender 2 that includes a mini tower defense game where you activate a crystal which sends in waves of enemy creatures that spawn to destroy it. Your goal is to stop these waves and protect this crystal. Rods and staff are at your disposal for a cost of defender medals to set up sentries who aid you in thwarting the swarm. I personally played Terraria over 700 hours alone, and this is partly due to the replayability coming from the new modes being added in the updates to the many mods that have been created for this game. I could have easily skipped over playing this game because my first impression was, well, it's just a simple looking 2D pixel game. It most certainly isn't. After all that I've gone over with you about Terraria in this video, it will make you think otherwise. I could go on about how fun Terraria is, but for the sake of your attention span, I'll stop here. But before I let you go, a few questions and thoughts for you as an obedient listener who watched all the way until the end of the video. Terraria is one of the best-selling video games of all time, and I think no one would have expected that playing it for the first time. Has there been any other game that has surprised you to the same caliber as Terraria did for me and many others? What is the most hours you have put in a single game? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and consider subscribing. Thank you, and later.